Hi, I'm Alec from EasierHabits.com, and I coach work-from-home dads in how to design their ideal lives, one they're proud to model for and share with their kids. So one of the big things that's been on my mind since the social dilemma, and really since I've become a parent, is how I want my kids to be healthy and happy, and how screen time will be one big factor in that equation. So I will say before I move into anything else that there are many wonderful things computers do allow us to do. And of course, I was a web programmer for a while. I tried to pick companies that I thought were producing products that would be helpful to people. So LinkedIn in helping people get jobs, and then later focusing on education companies. And so there are definitely positive uses of screen time. Connecting with family, especially during COVID, has been fantastic. A few weeks ago, we had an all-family Zoom, which I don't think we've had me, my brothers, and my parents in the same place for quite some time. It happens really rarely. So actually being able to schedule that via Zoom is wonderful. So screen time absolutely can bring some happiness, but it doesn't lend itself to moderation. And I've known this since I was a kid and we got our first computer. I remember my mom making the comment once that it's almost as if the computer knew the perfect time to break down when things were stressful anyway and there'd be a problem with the computer, and then me and other members of my family would be in a foul mood because a lot of my well-being at the time was tied into computers. A lot of how I learned to entertain myself and regulate my mood even from a very young age started to become tied into screen time. Of course, there's TV time as well as computer time. And that only enhances when you get on your own and you have your own computer. And that's one of the big things that, for instance, college-age guys struggle with is spending tons of time on the computer, and it can affect your life in a number of ways. It can replace outside time and exercise time, and staying on the computer and doing that one more thing can push your bedtime later and later so you're not getting enough sleep. So it can very clearly have a negative effect. Plus, I've observed in my own life that if I spend too much time on the computer, how I feel when I'm done is tired and cranky, not refreshed or excited, like I might feel after doing some form of recreation that is a little bit more rejuvenating, like doing some exercise, going outside, watching the clouds go by, even just listening to music for a moment, the music for itself, not while I'm doing something else. There are a lot of things that can have that impact, and sometimes being on the computer does have that impact for me. For example, creative projects that I do on the computer, writing or designing books are some of the things I like to do. Occasionally, I try and do some graphic design. I'm terrible at it, but it is fun, or drawing. Not particularly strengths of mine, but as a fun, creative way to do that. I can, of course, do that on paper as well with the drawing, but there are fun aspects of doing digital artwork in Photoshop that you can't do with paper. And so it is really, so there are positive uses of screen time, but screen time tends to lend itself to just watching one more video or scrolling past one more post and then leaving you feeling hungry, angry, and tired, and in a worse mood than you started with. So really, as soon as I became a parent, I started thinking about how screen time would impact my kids and what kinds of rules would I set up for them, as well as how would I live, what kind of screen time would I have in my life and model for my kids. And of course, if you're a work from home parent during COVID, especially if schools are not available for your kids right now, or they're supposed to be doing virtual learning, which is screen time, this is a particular pain point. Often the only uninterrupted time you can get for either downtime or for working is when your kids are on a screen. And it's especially true if you have young kids that have a limited capacity to see to their own needs, get their own snacks, answer questions, avoid making messes or clean up giant messes that they do make. And so this is a pain point for a lot of young parents that I've talked to, and one that my wife and I have run into ourselves quite a bit. And so here are some rules that have helped us structure our time a little bit better so we don't have to rely quite as much on screen time. And the biggest piece of advice that we got when we were young parents, and that has been very helpful and we still use today, is to take turns being in charge of the kids. That doesn't mean you can't do anything with the kids when it's not your turn, but it does mean that if you need uninterrupted work time or downtime, you know you can count on it at a regular time every day. The very first lifestyle change that we really made together as a couple, that involved, some trade-offs and talking about our needs, was when Meg told me she needed some more downtime, so she wanted me to take over bath time with our very young number one, our first kid, when he was a baby. And that allowed her some much needed sanity time, probably like 20 to 30 minutes, not a ton, but just enough that she could recover. And if that's where you have to start, that is a great place to start, where if one spouse is taking the kids a lot, just take over one activity, or delegate one activity, and then that allows you some downtime where your spouse can be taking the kids and you don't have to rely on screen time as much. Now, of course, if it is your turn and you're with the kids, then I like to break up my time in a few different ways. I like to have a mix of structured time with my kids, and this could be time that I'm teaching them, could be just recreation, like reading a book or some clear activity. It could be, and one of my favorites is doing chores. Early on, I realized if I could do chores when it was my turn with the kids, I'd have more time during my downtime or my off turn to either work or have more downtime. Plus, it gave me an opportunity to model hard work with the kids and responsibility with the kids, and hopefully create a positive association with some chores, the idea that it's spending time with dad. And so, right now they'll help me, for instance, on Saturdays, we'll do our hour-long cleaning, and the kids will help me clean, we'll play music, we'll make it fun, we'll have a dance party afterwards. And it's a great structured way to spend non-screen time, but time that is still productive to me. Of course, not all time with kids should be structured. I like to have some unstructured playtime with them. And of course, I think another thing as your kids get older, to think about, if they're younger than 2, this is really hard, but especially when they get into the 4 to 6 range, you can start thinking about how to give them structured or unstructured solo playtime. Now, structured looks like giving them some kind of goal or task or something to work on. And for the most part, they end up kind of doing whatever they want anyway, and so it often ends up unstructured, but at least maybe you'll give them a list of tasks like, here, you can draw, you can look at these books, practice reading on your own if you like. Those types of activities you can play with Legos, but it's quiet time, and that will give you some time, even if you're the parent on call, to be able to work or to be able to unplug for a moment and de-stress, because being constantly on for kids can be really stressful. And so if you have those types of activities planned at a regular day, a regular time in the day, kids will learn to expect that, and they will develop the ability to naturally start doing their own thing at a particular time. I actually noticed this morning, where I have some time where I have my youngest do solo playtime, and I'll go jogging or do some exercise. And this morning, I didn't even tell him I was about to go jogging. He just wandered away at the appropriate time, and started doing his own thing. Some of that is because my wife has chosen to use that time as playtime with the kids sometimes. But again, it's a very different position when you're choosing to play with the kids in your off time, because there's something fun that just occurred to you, and you can't wait to play with your kids, versus being on call for hours straight. And so that is one big way that you can reduce reliance on screen time, is just have a structure for your time. Know what you're going to do with it, and where your structured time with your kids is, where your unstructured playtime with your kids is, where you're just kind of doing whatever they ask, and then where their solo playtime is. And if you do that, you will be able to minimize your screen time. Now, of course, screen time is still a thing. We still rely on it sometimes. There's some times when Meg has the kids and I'm working, where Meg will be tutoring and she needs some uninterrupted time. So we do have some screen time. And with that, there's just a couple things we keep in mind. One, there's different types of screen time, different qualities of screen time. There's some shows that might be more educational than others, or screen time that doesn't involve shows like either reading books on their app, or if they're young and they can't read books on their own, being able to have books read to them, high quality books. One of the things that I noticed when Eli was pretty young, still 2 or 3, and we're starting to introduce screen time, we did it with a show called Little Einsteins, which is very musical. I'm a little bit musical. I play guitar and sing okay. My wife has a beautiful singing voice, but it's not like we're doing organized musical things all the time. But my oldest kid, while he was watching Little Einsteins for a couple of years, he really, really loved it. He picked up an ability to start messing around on the piano and figuring out the melodies to classical music on the piano by himself. So that was a very high quality screen time for him, and he got something out of it. Now, of course, another thing you can do to augment a positive relationship with screens for your kids is to make screen time a reward for some kind of effort. Make kids work for it. They have to clean up or do some other task or study something. And that will help reinforce the idea that study or work comes before screen time. Screens are not a way to procrastinate doing our jobs. And so that can make screen time more positive, in combination with making sure that not only do you have a plan for your time, your unstructured and structured time outside of screen time, but you know what screen time is and what it looks like. You have a plan for what kinds of things kids can engage in, whether it's educational games or shows or books. Now, those are just some ideas. Splitting the time with your partner, structuring your own time, dividing it between structured tasks, unstructured play, and solo playtime, and then using screen time carefully as a reward for good effort, work, or study, and planning out your screen time, not just popping the first thing that comes to mind, but thinking about what kind of screen time would kids both enjoy and learn and grow from, potentially. But those are just guidelines, and they're going to be different for each person, and they're going to be different tips and tricks that work for you and your family. And I think the number one thing you can do as a parent to foster a healthy relationship with screens for your kids is to have a healthy relationship with screens yourself. Now, as I mentioned before, screens are designed to lead us to excess. We have all sorts of carefully programmed games, cliffhanger series, and social media apps that are designed to give us regular hits of dopamine and get us hooked, so that when we are unplugged from them, we don't know what to do with ourselves. And when we are tuned into the screen, we're thinking just one more, just one more. And a couple signs that your own relationship has become unhealthy with screens is that you are ignoring your own bodily needs, like going to the bathroom or eating when you're doing screen time, or when you unplug, your mood is cranky, you don't feel good instead of feeling refreshed or ready to move on to your next activity. You feel kind of bored, kind of confused, kind of irritable. And of course, another sign that it is unhealthy is you do it instead of necessary work or other tasks for the day, or you have a hard time going to bed at night after unplugging from screens, that you just do one more thing, and that keeps pushing your own bedtime later, so you're not getting enough sleep. Those are all ways that screen time can be, we can notice that screen time is unhealthy for us. And this is something I have to think about from a young age. My parents did give me a bedtime, and sometimes they would have to enforce it. I'm really grateful for them for that. But when I was in college, or even as a young married and working, I would stay up later till 12 or 1 because I had a hard time unplugging, and just one more YouTube video or one more quest in a game. And so I've had to be very thoughtful about how I scale back. And here's a few of the things that I've noticed where I can make a change. One change comes this week when I realized that I try and end my workday at 5 and give myself a break between 5 p.m. and around 5:30 when dinner happens. And when dinner happens, my kids will come into my room and come get me. And I realize my kids aren't seeing the work I do all day on my screens. What they're doing is seeing me watching a YouTube video or playing a game when they come to get me for dinner. And by this, I am modeling kind of an unhealthy dependence on computers for recreation. Like, probably the most positive thing for me to do if I have been working on the computer all day, if I really want to break, would be to get outside or, pick up my guitar, do something musical, draw by hand or on paper, but something away from a screen. And so I realized this as a dad. There are a lot of times where I wouldn't necessarily take care of myself if I didn't have kids, where I realized, like, oh, maybe this isn't the best thing for me to do, just more screen time after working on the computer all day. But it's just me, and even if I stay up late, or even if I'm not taking care of myself, even if I'm not eating well when I'm on the computer, I'll just suck it up because it's only me. But once my kids are in the picture and I realize that they're seeing and learning from the things I do, that raises the bar for taking care of myself. And so I realized, like, all right, I've made a commitment this week to not play games or watch YouTube videos after work, but to actually unplug. Now, of course, after the kids go to bed, I do allow myself screen time and some chill time, but I'm also working on getting to bed in an earlier hour. I've improved greatly. I almost always unplug by 10:30 or 10:45 naturally, but I'm just trying to push that a little bit earlier so I have more time between being on a screen and going to bed. And so what I'm doing this week is at 10:30, I'm doing Tai Chi as a way to unplug, and then I'll follow that up with some other non-screen activities, just taking a quick walk around to settle myself, to unload the dishwasher, which I've run earlier in the evening so that I don't have to do it in a hurry in the morning. Just non-screen activities. Reading, of course, love to read before going to bed. And even if my kids are not yet at an age where they'll see that, and it's kind of by design, right? I've pushed my screen time to after their bedtime, so they won't know how much screen time I really get in a day. But eventually they'll get older and they'll see what I do. And if I have those habits in place of making sure I get to bed at a reasonable hour and I unplug before I get to bed so I can have quality sleep, then they'll be able to pick those things up naturally. Plus, the time I spend observing how I feel with screens and creating rules and structures for myself will help me be ready to create those same structures for kids who aren't able to really understand the full impact of screen time on them. They're less self-aware. They're less able to extrapolate in the future what'll happen if they keep staying up late every day in the week. How they're going to feel, how that's going to be an adverse impact on their health, etc. As always, if this video has been helpful for you, go ahead and click the like button or subscribe to make sure that you get the latest and greatest videos. If you know someone who is trying to figure out what kind of screen time limits to set for their kids or themselves, go ahead and share this video or comment below to help other people with your own suggestions. Love to hear what works for you in terms of screen time with your kids and screen time for yourself. And until next week, make big changes, one small habit at a time.